Cryptography is all about secret keys that need high-quality entropy to be truly random. NetRandom from Whitewood Security delivers pure quantum entropy on demand across the entire data center and out to the cloud. Think NTP, but for quantum entropy. Inoculate your applications from making weak crypto keys, all without having to change a line of code. Visit getnetrandom.com to learn how you can take control of your entropy supply and ensure crypto security today. Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. Onapsis is the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting at blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. I wanted to tell everyone about a webcast that we're doing with Onapsis November 16th from 3 to 4 p.m. Seba, who is their lead research person for Onapsis. Get this. Onapsis found, I want to say the number is like around 20. In just October alone, Seba and his team found 20 vulnerabilities that span across both SAP and Oracle. I call it business-critical applications. Yeah. And I know it sounds like a boring title, like securing business-critical applications, but really the whole gist is Seba's going to be in studio, and I'm going to ask him a lot of questions like, so, dude, like, your research team was really busy. Like, get into the details and some of the flaws, and then talk about, like, so you're finding these major flaws. What's that like? How are you reporting them? So do some of the higher level aspects, but also dig in with him and say, what are the impacts? How is it executed? Why aren't some of these things fixed? He found some SQL, or his team and himself found some SQL injection vulnerabilities. And I'm like, I feel like we don't see a lot of those SQL injection vulnerabilities anymore. Or at least not as many. I think the same thing with cross-site scripting. They kind of fall in that class where people are starting to figure some of that stuff out.
Starting to.
But here we have these really mission-critical applications, e-business suite, and there's that's the one from Oracle, right? And there's these like heinous SQL injection vulnerabilities, and I'm like, it's going to be a very interesting conversation. SecurityWeekly.com/Onapsis. Please go register for that. It's going to be an awesome conversation. Whether you're looking into the security of SAP and Oracle applications, or you're like, hey, we have those, and I'm a security person, and like I've never really been able to. Yeah, no one like really lets me in on this. Is kind of where I see a lot of people fitting. Like, no one lets us test those because they're business critical. And so Onapsis has all the good stuff. They got a great product for doing that.
Yeah, and what that also means is that if you watch that webinar, you're going to get an understanding of conversations you can go have, right? A lot of times security feels like it's always reactive. And so webcasts like this, content like that, you can listen and you say, whoa, that is business critical. I have to deal with that. Now you've got some insights. I think the trick, of course, is going to be, how do you go explain that to somebody else?
Yeah,
without,
explain the impact.
But by being able to look at that and being able to look at the fact that it's business critical, you then get that opportunity. I think, too, a lot of times people need to listen with that intent to say, I should regress this against the list that I've got. Oh, I found a couple on here. I need to go have conversations, and that's your opportunity for those conversations not to be, so I'm here from security again, and I've got bad news for you. It's to say, hey, this is critical, right? I just got some insight. Let's make sure we're working together to keep you protected. You do that. That's a pretty compelling shift.
Yeah. So I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. And now we're going to talk about the security news. I really want to start with this Microsoft DDE
I want you to tell me more about this because I didn't see this one at all this week.
As pen tester Larry, you should be all you got to be all over this, because the frustrating part is, well, I guess let me back up before I call out Microsoft for being silly. I'll use a nice word. It isn't silly, but it's completely ridiculous why they're not deeming this the way it should be deemed. So basically, have you ever, I used to use applications for Office that were installed locally on your machine. I think a lot of it shifted to the cloud, but if you've got a spreadsheet in Microsoft Excel, right, and you worked really hard to get that in there, maybe you created a chart or something, and then you had to write a report that put some text around, like I got to explain these graphs and stuff that I put in Excel. So you're writing this Word document, and you're like, well, I really want to put the Excel spreadsheet. Yeah, I want to link it, put the Excel spreadsheet inside of my Word document. And by the way, I'm still kind of modifying my Excel spreadsheet, and then I don't want to have to go re-embed it. Like, it just automatically happens. Like, that Excel data just magically, for the end users and for those of us that haven't looked into the DDE protocol or object linking embedding we talked about, right? It just happens magically. But really what that is a DDE with a dynamic data exchange.
Yep.
It allows applications like that to share data. So you can bring data from Excel into Word, and it magically happens. Now notice when you've done that, it doesn't ask you, hey, do you want to let Excel send me data? No. Like, it just happens. It happens. It's easy for the end user. And what the researchers at SensePost figured out was that essentially the DDE component in Word could reach out and basically execute commands and run other information, execute things like PowerShell in the background.
And this isn't new.
No, I don't think that. I mean, this is a fundamental. So what Microsoft has said, speaking of is it new, Microsoft says basically this is a feature. It's not a security vulnerability.
Yep.
Like, this is the way it's supposed to work. You're supposed to have other applications are supposed to be able to share.
20 years ago, if you went to Microsoft with something like this, the standard comment was, that's not a bug, that's a feature. And you'd say, but I don't see it. It's an undocumented feature.
It's a vulnerability.
Well, so here's the question, and you and I talked about this a bit yesterday. I think you set up the use case really well. I'm working on a spreadsheet. I need to keep one copy of it, so I'm just going to link that information to my document. I've been in the business world for 20 years. I've never seen this. I mean, I've seen it, but it's not what I see as a common practice. So I think the question I have then is it a feature that people still want? Is it a feature people are relying on?
Well, that's the question that I believe enterprises are asking today. Having spoken with some of those enterprises, their concern is they don't know who's using it. Right. They don't know how they're using it. They don't know how often it's being used and how critical the function is that it's supporting.
I love those questions.
So, like, when you don't know the answer to any of those questions.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, you're like, well, shit, if I turn it off,
people might come screaming.
I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's like removing a module from the NPM library and shit breaks.
Yeah. It's different from the Oracle and SAP question because you know that, well, that's very critical.
Those are business critical. We're already using those,
we know
we've got to take care of it.
We know that.
This is a feature. It's an undocumented feature.
We don't know.
But, I mean, we don't really know how it works. And so then if you say to somebody who's using it, how well does that work? And then, and the thing I'm thinking about now is the amount of collaboration that we have. I think Google pushed a lot of people towards everybody can edit the document at once. And now, you can do that across if you have Office 365 or anything else. So I'm going to be curious then how much longer the DDE is even
necessary.
Needed because you have other ways to be able to handle it.
Well, the DDE also happens, I believe, in the cloud. Well, it does. No, it does because there are things that are dynamically updated and included in G Suite documents across multiple spreadsheets, presentations, forms, the whole thing.
So I'd also mention O365 does similar type things.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was saying. I was saying Google started it, but Office 365 now absolutely has it. It's not necessarily as clean, but that's that. I guess that's and then I think what's kind of interesting when I look at it, because I do look at it a lot of times from a business lens, is to say, okay, so do I need it? Yes or no? Because I actually kind of get that's a feature. Is it being used the way we want it to? No. It's always worked this way. Back in my days of teaching this SSP, we talked about all of these exact types of. This isn't new. Like this concept, the concept isn't new, right? This is something that we've looked at. Then I look at it and I go, okay, we've had this conversation on this program about protocols and things that were developed 20, 30, 40 years ago. And knowing what we know today, would we develop them the same way? We'll know. Okay, cool. Well, let's go change it. Okay, well, last time I checked, we haven't because we're so reliant on these things. So I think what's interesting, Paul, is as you pointed out. So do we know how often people are using it? Do we know if they're dependent on it or not? Do we have an alternative to it? I can't answer any of those questions.
And I think even some of that is that whether or not anybody's using it, whether or not we rely on it, it's enabled by default. Am I correct?
Okay, that's an interesting point.
And I'm guessing. I don't know.
And it's something that the user is using. They really don't know they have this functionality. So my concern is, even if I go get there's Yara rules out there that can enable logging. There's ways to log essentially when this event occurs, whether it's malware or not. You can log when this event occurs. Even if I'm an analyst looking at those logs, like I don't know if I turn this off, if that's going to impact someone, and how's it going to impact that person. If I go turn it off, even with some awareness that we're going to do this, the end user is going to be like, even if you carefully craft the message, there's still going to be users that are like, oh, that doesn't apply to me. Then you turn it off, and the next week they're like raising the alarm to their manager. Hey,
my shit's broke.
My process that I was doing that reports that's in the way of us making money is broken. And I don't know why it's broken, because, well, I read that email, but I didn't think it applied to me. So now I don't know why it's broken. So now you get all these people. It has a trickling effect. The manager's calling up to the director. The director's like, why is this broken? The help desk is involved, and they're like, I don't know why this is broken.
They're not even going to admit to reading the email. They're going to say, somebody's going to say security and say, I sent it out, and they're going to go, I didn't get it.
Right.
And by the way, if we go read that email, it's going to say, well, due to the DDE vulnerability. And people are going, what the hell is that? DDE?
Isn't that like a wrestling move they do?
Like I got my flu shot. Doesn't that protect me?
Like, we have a firewall.
I'm good. I gave it the office. Thanks, everybody. I don't need that.
Like, dude, like, I've got a computer. Why do I need AOL? Like,
well, and the new thing that's happened is that malware ravaging this vulnerability. I mean, like, a lot.
You know what's
droppers,
interesting?
exploits, and malware is actually in the same sentence in the threat pulse article. I
think not Kevin's got eyes just glazed over when you heard droppers and malware.
Let's do it, Kevin. I want to hear what you have to think. Well, what you Go ahead. Talk. I'm going to drink some more martini.
As you guys are discussing this, I'm looking at Microsoft's recommendations about how to reduce the impact of this, and it's a little out of control. The backwards compatibility aspect of this is that they're essentially saying it's not our problem, but we do offer what they sound really nice features like attack surface reduction component, which turns out to be all these PowerShell commands to disable things, and you'd think would be disabled by default. Turns out no. Maybe you want your Office applications to create child processes. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a thing that Word should be doing.
Well, yeah.
Making children? No, I don't want word making.
I got enough of those to support already.
You've got enough.
Calls, I don't know, downloading other executables. That doesn't sound like compatibility between Office and Excel.
Seems legit. Seems legit. Totes.
Yeah.
Totes legit. Too legit.
So, I mean, there are some recommendations that they do provide just to kind of round out. And there are some things that you can turn off, certain registry keys that you can disable DDE entirely, particularly within Outlook. So but it's not a thing that your average user is going to be able to do. These things are targeted at enterprise admins. They're not mom and pop who are the ones who are really being impacted by the attacks that Paul's referring to, particularly blocking. These are coming through spam. They're coming through email attachments. They're coming through phishing attacks, and that's something an enterprise can at least has the resources to potentially handle. But that's not the people who are being impacted here. Mom and pop aren't using DDE to build Word documents.
My advice for enterprises has been, if you're going to turn it off, and there are, as Kevin said, so there's two things you can do to turn it off. I haven't read Microsoft's advice in any great detail. I've read some of the other posts that were published before today about this, and basically there's two things. One, the registry keys, as Kevin mentioned, which will turn it off entirely. What I've recommended enterprises do, similar to any kind of other patch, is start slowly rolling that out to your users and then see what breaks. That's not great advice. It's not a great approach.
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting about this, and I was just trying to quick search. We haven't talked to him yet on Startup. and I can't remember the name, but there's at least 1 or 2 companies out there now that's essentially, I mean, we talked about whitelisting before. There are technologies that exist that can run inline, and it's almost like having an application layer proxy. But what it does is they've gone through all of this, and they basically said, oh, okay, so you want to use Microsoft, the whole suite. Great. What do you want it to do? And that way, if anybody sends it, so you can get fine-grained enough to say, you know what? You can go ahead. You can link Excel to Word in our environment, but it cannot go out and it cannot come in. And what's really kind of neat is the way that it works is that it's essentially like you put a copy in here, it strips it all out, and it rebuilds it using its rule set. So what most of them do to move at line speed is they don't analyze it. So it's not a sandbox. I'm not looking to see if there's any code in there. All I'm doing is I'm stripping it all down, and then I'm rebuilding it based on my rule set. So if my rule set says no inbound linking, then it just pulls it out. Now, it does mean, it would be broken.
Yep.
But and they can do it too across PDF. Like most of the common objects or any of the file types that we use, there's 3 or 4 companies, and a lot of it came out of, at least the companies I've looked at came out of Israel, and it's the same kind of a concept. Like if you wanted to go into a secure installation, you had to hand them the USB on one side or the CD or DVD on one side, and they would take it, literally destroy it, but then give you the clean copy on the other side. And as long as it passed through the rules, it was whitelisted, you were okay to have it. So what's interesting is, but Kevin said something I thought was really key. Enterprises can pay for that. Enterprises that are concerned about this, there are solutions out there. Mom and pop shops, that's not, I don't see that being like a SaaS-style service.
Now, the interesting thing is there is a third-party patch that you can patch the DLL that handles this, and it'll turn it off. Now, I caution enterprises not to do this. They don't do this. Bad things happen when you apply third-party patches.
Yep.
There's like what happens when there is a patch available? What happens when you patch that DLL and it doesn't work? Now, the way I understand it, too, is if you modify that DLL, you're changing the signature of that DLL. What if AV eats it now because it has a different, it's not a clean, essentially binary anymore? Like there's a whole list of reasons.
Test it. If you're going to do that, test it.
You remember, Larry, and others worked at universities, right, when worms were running around. And sometimes they were running around and you didn't have a patch. And then it'd sometimes be that third-party patch. And you're like, yes, this will work. Then you're like, no, that's a bad idea.
Yep. We've actually, in many cases in the last 11, 12, how many years, have recommended the third-party patches, but on very, very limited occasions with lots of testing.
So do you find that when you get to the point where you make that recommendation, that the risk for that organization in their context is so high?
Yes.
Those trade-offs are worth it, and they have so if we carry over, they have the capabilities and the capacity to do that testing, to do that monitoring, to pay attention to it.
Yep,
exactly.
Well, I mean, and really the real issue here is you shouldn't allow users to click on malicious documents, and you should stop email phishing. And then if you do that, I mean, you really don't have this problem then, because the malicious documents never get inside your environment, right? And then, well, if they do, you've got an EDR or some kind of endpoint product that when it does execute something, it detects it 100% of the time. Right?
So we should go back to paper and pencil is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah,
make it simple.
much. Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. Wow.
Agreed.
What was that? That was my phone. Sorry. Anyway, anyone else more thoughts on the DDE issue?
No. I got one that I want to talk about.
I just a quick poll. How many people think that Microsoft will issue a patch for this? And if they do, how long do you think before it's issued?
I don't think they'll issue a patch. I think they'll just offer the advice on how to disable.
Yeah, it might become something in a policy configuration or something down the road.
Kevin?
Someone sent me a text message that our YouTube stream is broken, just in case you're wondering. Okay, it's back up.
That's what she said.
Whoever texted me. I didn't recognize the number, but someone Google hacked my cell phone. Someone hacked their way in the show. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Kevin, what do you think?
Did that.
I agree with you all. I feel like there's going to be some esoteric configuration option that the people impacted by this are probably not going to understand when they're setting up Word or Excel for the first time.
I think
that's the unfortunate reality.
I want to put a call out to all Microsoft customers, especially large ones, to push Microsoft to issue some kind of better fix for this vulnerability. Because if enough customers complain, Microsoft will release a patch when enough customers complain.
Customer requirement, customer demand. But you know what? I at least like say, give us a solution. I think giving us a patch is too narrow. Show us. I mean, if it's a configuration, that's fine. And Kevin, to your point, make it a little bit more easy for us to understand.
Right.
And then again, I'd be curious too, and I'd be curious if Microsoft has usage insights onto it, because then if you could turn some of this off by default, that'd be great. But what's kind of rolling in the back of my head is maybe this is used more ways than we know right now.
Larry, you wanted to go somewhere.
The story that I want to talk about was the don't hack back story. Because I thought this was really kind of, like, very. Mine was from Vice.
Yep, mine too.
So it was the title is very much doom and gloom, in that Keith Alexander said, "Hey, we're relaxing the rules a little bit that may give you the ability to hack back, and do so okay, but don't do that, because you could start a war that way."
I thought it was very interesting in the article that General Keith Alexander, former director of the NSA, said, we can give Sony six. Talking about this in context, they're talking about what if Sony were to hack back against North Korea. And his response is, essentially, we can give Sony 6 guys from my old place there, assuming NSA, and they'd beat up North Korea like red-headed stepchild, no pun intended. I thought that was a pretty profound statement. I wanted to get everyone's thoughts on that. That was just one of my takeaways from the article.
I would tend to agree that may in fact be possible. That said, think about what potentially North Korea's cyber capability may actually be, and it's probably a hell of a lot better than many folks realize.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a bigger question. Do we generally dislike the concept of hack back, or do we dislike the concept of somebody from a government perspective saying, you shouldn't hack back, only we should hack back? Like, is it that
that's exactly what he said. That's exactly what he said.
No,
because
I know.
if we hack
do we
back,
not like?
If we, the government, hacks back and create a war, that's okay. That's ours. But if Paul has this thing on his website because at securityweekly.com and it hacks someone back and they happen to be in North Korea and that starts a war, that's bad.
That's bad. It's also a violation of the CFAA.
On whose part?
When I do it.
Yeah.
It's because someone attacks me, that could potentially violate the CFAA. If I hack them back, then I could be in violation of the CFAA. But when the government does it in the protection of the country, in hopefully in collaboration, with some oversight. Okay, maybe I'm stretching it a little bit.
You're optimistic. I like that.
Very optimistic.
No, but my question is though, at least from our perspective, are we okay with the concept of hacking back, or we're not okay with it? Right? Because there's two parts. There's no, hacking back's okay, Michael. And there's hacking back's not okay. And gosh, when the government tells us not to do it because only they could do it, right? Like it's a...
Yeah, no, that's weird. I agree. But it's also...
I'm not really a fan of it. I haven't seen a case where I think it's a good strategy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the trust in the government or don't really go together.
I'm going to separate out. I don't even mean from a government perspective. I mean, this is stuff we've talked about for 20 years. And I can, in 15 or 20 years ago, it was, are your forensics capabilities good enough to have certainty that that's exactly what happened, that you're going to go take action on somebody else? And are you good enough to be able to do that? And what other hell is going to rain down on you when you do that? Take for just a second the legality out of it. Don't worry about that for a second. And just go, from a practicality perspective, does this even make sense?
Attribution is hard.
But it really comes down to the quality of your intelligence. And I think probably some of what General Alexander is saying is that our government agencies
have much better intelligence.
Correct.
To make much more intelligent decisions about what operations should be conducted against what countries based on intelligence. You might observe, or I might observe, any of us observes an attack against us, assumes that we know who to hit back.
Right. Mid-level enterprise observes an attack coming from Afghanistan. They go attack, and not really from Afghanistan.
Right.
Exactly.
That just happens to be the endpoint, three layers deep.
Exactly.
From somewhere.
But also, I think that in defending the country, you have to. A lot of people have to make careful decisions about the severity of the attack and how the operation is conducted. In other words, in the physical sense, do I deploy as special forces, or do I declare all-out war, or do I do something in between there, or on either extreme of that?
And that's the difference. So to clarify from my perspective, I think in the commercial sector or in the civilian sector, I haven't seen a case where hacking back makes sense at all. I don't even care what you did before joining it. Like, that doesn't make sense. But if you're suggesting, the government acting with cyber capabilities now, they've stood up all the new capabilities. Every branch has something. That's great. That's part of the workforce. I'm okay with that.
Right.
That's if you're doing that in a military or a government context, that's fine. Or it's not fine. But to me, separate issue. When I see hack back, and then they use Sony as an example, I don't see any situation where I think a private sector company should do anything other than defend itself successfully and focus on one of the other 2,000 things you got to do.
Gotti Evron came on the previous episode and talked about hacking back in a much more different context. And really, what we go back and listen to that if you're listening to this now and want to know more. And basically what Gotti's saying is, and what we all agreed upon was it's the back piece that's bad. When I start to, or an organization starts to launch attacks back, that's bad. However, if someone has infiltrated computers within my own network, I own those computers and all of that property, I pretty much have free reign to do what I want on my own stuff.
I'm good with that.
Right? And that was really, and
like
so
that.
What Gotti was advocating for is to qualify that term hacking back, in that I can take actions against an attacker. However, I have to live within the confines of the law.
Keep it in the bounds.
And keep it in the bounds.
Oh, we drop a file that's got Social Security numbers on it, and they pull that down, and it contains some DDD exploits that wipes their system or something.
Well, no, you can wipe your own systems. You can't go wipe the attacker's system.
But I didn't wipe their systems. They pulled a file that was on my system. Is that a hack back?
That's a gray area.
That's a bad.
Exactly.
It's because it's their property, not yours.
Well, no. My property gets hacked. I plant a file on my asset that gets hacked that is, in fact, something that no one should be touching. Like, because it has some vulnerability exploit, evil attacker grabs, oh my God, I got Social Security numbers, and they pull it. And
I go back to the mining shack in the hills of South Dakota, where I put all my mining stuff in it, and in the off season. And if someone opens the door, there's a shotgun that blows them away. Yeah. Like that's setting a lethal trap is how I put that.
Yep. Okay. And that's why I throw that out there, because I wanted the discussion.
Yeah. Yep. I would say no.
You asking for a friend there?
No.
All right. What else do we got? We got other stuff to talk about too.
Of course.
So some people are testifying in front of Congress, including Marissa Mayer. And who was the Equifax CEO? Smith?
In Senate, not Congress.
Senate, thank you. It's a Senate committee hearing, essentially, right? As we've seen. And who is it? The Richard Smith also. And they're going to get grilled by Congress. I don't know, and that made the news. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, so here's the thing. This is just somebody saying, look at us, we took it seriously, and we brought those CEOs in, and we demanded they do something, and look at me, vote for me, I care about cybers and the kids, and it's this is a complete waste of time. Nothing will come from this.
I agree.
Except lots of words.
Lots of words, lots of waste of time and effort, lots of whatever, and there's no value.
It might be kind of entertaining to watch.
I don't think with Marissa Mayer it's going to be entertaining.
No.
Based on what we've learned about how it was or wasn't handled and how she has or hasn't done things, no. We didn't. I wasn't on any of the programs where we discussed it. I think the way, and to be fair, I've only kind of read the reports of. I didn't watch the testimony, but I think the way that the Equifax CEO handled it was interesting. I know a lot of people got upset because he didn't name names, but he assigned pretty discrete blame at different points, and people didn't think that was leadership. At the same time, if he just got up there and said, well, I mean, that happens. It was sophisticated and unprecedented. And, like he came in, he had dates. Like somebody had at least prepared him to come in with a specific set of facts. And
you don't
we
think
may or may not have liked that, but
someone in the Senate committee is going to ask ridiculous questions that are going to be hilarious. Come on now.
Okay. You know what? I wasn't thinking of it that way.
That's what I'm thinking.
Like, I mean, Guam is an island that could tip over?
They could be ridiculous educated questions, right? And they could be ridiculous uneducated questions, which have a tendency to be way more entertaining.
Yeah. I'm in a serious mood. Like for me right now, that would be like somebody else is going to watch that, not realize the hilarity of it.
Yeah,
and
but we will. That's what I'm saying.
No,
we should
but then you're going to have others now thinking those are the questions that they should ask.
That's true.
And it just gets more complicated for us. Now,
all right. Anyway, next.
I don't like it.
Stole my thing.
I know. I'm sorry. You got to be a fucking downer, man.
Let's talk about Mr. Robot.
Yeah.
Did you
admit it? No,
or not?
Admittedly, so I think there are a lot of people in our industry that don't watch it anymore because they think it's boring.
Yeah, that's why I stopped watching. I'll admit, I stopped watching it when they had pretty much. It was almost like an entire season where they really didn't talk much about hacking. Does anyone remember that?
But you know what? I think it's been a season or so. I'm a season behind or so because I do that and we binge watch. But you know what? For me, that's okay. Because I still think it's quite entertaining, regardless of whether the fact it's about hacking or not, or is a geopolitical thing, or it's because the story is well written. There's lots of television that would argue that I watch on TV that is probably a lot of folks consider crap, but I enjoy the entertainment.
Yeah.
So that's why I still watch it, because I think it's entertaining.
Do you watch the Orville?
No.
I find that much better than Mr. Robot right now. In fact, especially if you're a Star Trek fan. So in Mr. Robot, the Elliot character does the name drop of Dave Kennedy, pretends to be Dave Kennedy in a social engineering.
It was
Dave was so excited about this. Did you see how excited he was? So excited.
I mean, I could smell it from here.
Love Dave. I could smell Dave's excitement from a mile away. Also, Moxie Marlinspike was mentioned in the episode. So
really, I haven't watched the episode, and I only watched that one scene, just because I wanted to say what Dave's excitement was about. Yeah, he sits down in the meeting and like totally social engineers them. And who are you? Oh, I'm Dave Kennedy. I work with Greg. We were responsible for the Q4 push.
Yeah, and they said something about having long hair.
I had longer hair back then. Just like Santa.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
But yeah, still pretty damn cool. Good. And of course, I loved some of the Facebook posts that Chris Nickerson said, dude, like, TV is not a badge of honor. And then Dave responds back with, dude, I still watch your show all the time. In fact, I ask other people to watch your show all the time. It's like, touche. Tiger team for the win.
Tiger team for the win. Oh, boy.
Well, look, I just skimmed this hacking the fingerprint biometric one. So is it hacking? So, Paul, you're right there, and let's say you're using a fingerprint biometric, and you fall asleep, and I take your thumb and press it on the phone. That's hacking now? That feels like a misleading headline to me.
Gummy bears. I mean, what? No.
Well, no, gummy bears to me would be hacking it.
Yeah.
This is simple. Man fell asleep. Woman took his thumb, put it on the phone, unlocked it, discovered he was cheating on her, and then lost her mind and forced the plane to land. Like that doesn't feel like hacking to me.
That sounds like password reuse to me.
Well, no, I think it's simple. I mean,
it's hacking if you're using something as it's not intended to be used. His thumb was intended to be the. He was the.
But it wasn't
he just happened to be asleep.
It wasn't intended to be used by someone else.
So this shows you the distinction between authentication and identification.
It was sneaky.
It was sneaky. Yeah, I didn't like the headline. That's all.
Would this be considered unauthorized access?
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
That's exactly right. Right. So it's identification, authentication, authorization. It was authenticated. We presume foolishly that biometrics also include identification, and clearly they don't. And completely unauthorized.
And now my question would be, prove it.
Yeah. Great.
Prove it.
Great point.
Prove that it was unauthorized.
That's true.
Yeah. Where's the audit trail that said that he didn't authorize it?
I think technically
he did.
This is as much hacking as the story I'm about to tell.
Yes, please do.
I won't say where this came from, but someone told me about husband and wife, and the husband was cheating on the wife, and the wife found out because the husband was texting, what he thought was texting, back and forth with the mistress, however, didn't realize how Apple iMessages worked.
Showed up on the iPad,
all of the messages were showing up on the iPad. Yes. Yes. That's, I think, similar hacking.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're gonna call that hacking, then wow, gosh, we've got a lot of stuff that we would call hacking. I get nervous with those things.
Dude, can you
I'm
hack
a professional hacker then at that point. I mean,
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly. I've been hacking since I was 3.
Did you guys read what happened with a Twilio?
Oh, what now?
App developers who code using the Twilio cloud-based platform are forgetful about removing their hard-coded credentials and basically allowed everyone to eavesdrop. I don't use Twilio. Twilio. Which is Twilio?
Twilio?
What is
Twilio? I think it's Twilio. Twilio?
I've heard of
I thought it was Twilio too.
Is the eavesdropper vulnerability exposes mobile call text data? Is that the one?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm thinking of Trello.
No, it's Twilio.
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 Twilio is a cloud communications platform built for SMS voice and messaging applications and an API built for global scale.
Forgetful about removing their hard-coded credentials. This is not a new problem.
No.
This is also not a vulnerability.
No.
Correct.
This is well, no, it's a vulnerability, and there's a patch for it. There's a patch for human stupidity.
Oh, stop, Larry.
All right, there's a patch for human ignorance.
Well, let's go simpler, right?
Yeah.
Can you share this patch with us?
This is a QA. This is
Yeah.
one-time application.
Yes.
That's a denial of service attack, not a patch.
This is a testing breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've talked to a number of folks that tell me that there's a point in the process where this makes things go better. Great. And they always promise we'll remove them. So we say they're forgetful about it. They're not forgetful about it. It means there was no process in place. There's no discipline following it. There was no QA check. This wasn't something that they tested for.
How do you build in QA checks for credentials into your system? How do you know what credentials look like? How do you know?
I'm not enough of a developer, but I can tell you about enough projects where I can tell you how many hard-coded passwords we have.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a way to do it. I'm not smart enough. But everybody knows that. If you're watching, you know I'm not here because I'm smart. I don't even know
because you're good looking.
Is it good looking? Should I
no,
slide
that's
over a
not
little
it.
bit? I was
That's
gonna say,
not it.
I've got a face built for radio, man.
But I think it's more of a.
See, I've got a face for radio and a voice for text.
But I think it's more of an awareness and training issue at the core of it, right?
Mm.
As the developer, I know in my applications, because I have the security mindset, like I know that these passwords and these secrets, if they're misused, or I know if I'm misusing them, I know that that's bad, and I'm developing a plan to fix that. If there are developers that don't have the security mindset, they may put a secret key inside of a text file, and then it's very, very easy for that to end up in your software version control, or very easy for that to end up in a place where someone could read.
Yeah, look, I agree. I think it's we could call it a poor coding practice, or certainly not what we'd call a good coding practice.
Well, it's not even code. It's not even code.
But it's a practice.
It's architecture.
Of coding.
Yeah, it's architecture.
Okay, I completely agree with that. But then
I can have the most secure code in the world, but if I'm calling an API and I'm storing those keys and they're like there.
The thing that I find when I go look at this is and I'm looking at Twilio's response and I go, hold on, we tell people not to do this. Yeah, no. So here's what's probably happening, and I have no inside knowledge of it in this particular situation. But here's what typically happens: don't do this. By the way, your deadline is in 3 days. Well, I don't have what. Okay, well, do what you got to do. Just take it out when you're done. And that's so it's this whole they forgot. When we told them not to, but they're still doing it because they don't listen. But hey, we made our quarterly deadline. So it's a combination of architecture and practices, but it's that pressure. So we blame it on.
Is Jeff still on?
We blame it on developers.
Jeff, you there?
But I don't think we need to.
Oh, okay. This is a crypto problem, right? Because basically your keys are just hanging out there for everyone to read.
Is the answer.
Yeah, but you don't know. It's not even blockchain.
Right, isn't that the new PKI?
No, but you
don't get me started on blockchain right now. Don't get me started.
I think this is one of the emerging kind of thing in our field that we're going to see more and more as we get more agile with development. Excuse the pun. That we don't developers and security people alike don't realize the need and how bad the problem is of protecting these secrets and keys and how that is now scaling out. Mm-hmm. And there are companies that are providing solutions However, we as security people and developers, largely, in my assessment, aren't going, hey, you know, I have this problem where I'm trying to protect all of my keys and, like, I just can't. Because,
well, you got
like
99
you said,
problems. Where's this fit?
Right. That's the problem.
Yep.
Is you have 99 of them.
Right. And then
I use
and a key is definitely one of them.
And then I use Stead Knock, and now I've got 100 problems. Yep. And
it's a problem that I have with our own app, which is one of the reasons why I like developing our own app, because I can get in tune with these problems, and I'm like, wow. And the interesting part is when we talk to vendors that Michael and I and many of us do all the time, we come across ones and I'm like, yes, I have that problem. Like, why don't more people realize that they have the problem and go seek out these vendors and solutions? And some of them have a really elegant solution.
I have a little bit of an answer to that. Maybe not so much in the development side, but I'll tell you, there's a bunch of folks doing that privileged identity management or the privileged access management space. And when you listen to them start to talk about it, right? And you did the webcast earlier today with Jonathan Sander. There's times Jonathan and I have sat and talked about this, and I'm like, and he's like, no, you got to think about it this way. And solid stuff. And you're like, wow. You follow up and you go, well, how come more people aren't doing that? He's like, well, and I don't mean to put words in Jonathan's mouth, but when you start looking at it, well, who has the keys right now? Okay. And so you're going to say, hey, by the way, I have the keys and you totally shouldn't trust me, so I want to go put this other infrastructure in place? No. Because you say, well, I've got 99 problems and I'm pretty trustworthy. And Paul, I like you, you're trustworthy. And Larry, I don't actually trust you. So Paul, you can have the keys, and we're good to go. And so what happens is it's a, why don't we have more of it? Because the people who are aware of it say, that's a problem, but I've got all these other problems. And you know what? We're a team. This isn't going to be a problem for us. Those other people, totally a problem for them. They should be all over that. But us, no, I think we're good. And I think that's what happens. We did
an interview with someone on this problem. Do you remember?
Maybe.
Who was the person's name? The woman from Conjure.
Oh, Lawler.
She was awesome.
Elizabeth.
Lawler?
I think it was Lawler. Yeah, she's
awesome interview.
Yeah.
But it was exactly on this problem.
Yes, a couple weeks ago.
And they have
Security Weekly.
They have an open source solution to this problem.
Yeah, exactly right.
And yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, right, so if you get a chance to check out that interview, it was really kind of cool because what we talked about was a company that was a startup, and then they got acquired by CyberArk, and they went to CyberArk and said, hey, you know what? We always wanted to do this piece as open source to better the industry. We haven't had a chance. What do you think? And they went, yeah, let's do it. Let's roll it. So they went from commercial, and they're still a commercial solution, but they said, we found a really cool way to solve this.
Episode 58 of Startup Security Weekly, Elizabeth Lawler from
Yeah, you're in for a
CyberArk.
treat. She's great.
She's awesome. She's awesome. It was a great interview.
Yep.
And on this exact problem. Nice. Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I added it, because I'm like,
and I think,
this problem keeps coming up over and over again.
Think about it too, right? So then what we're saying is that to make something happen, you have to be aware of the problem. You have to understand the impact of the problem. You have to know that there's a solution to the problem, and then you have to be able to evaluate potential options to solve that problem to determine if they work in your environment,
but you have
and
to
then communicate that to somebody else.
The depth of that problem, like how many places?
That's the impact.
How many places do I have this problem? And that's, I think, with this particular issue, isn't always apparent. Like,
no,
yeah, I have a config file and it's got these like secret keys in it and stuff, but I don't understand that that's even a problem. And how do I identify all my applications that might have this problem? It's weird. How do you protect your secrets? It's really the question. I get it because I have this problem in a big way.
Well, and I think it's going to continue. I mean, I think that we see different versions of this manifested in consistently different ways. And so whereas a lot of people almost feel despair at this, I think that we will start to see solutions. I think that the problem is we don't understand the problem. And so as a result, it sounds good, we can talk about it, and it's still a lot of ships passing in the night or whistling past the graveyard. And instead, I think what will start to happen is people will get it, and they'll find the use case, and then somebody else will go, oh, well, it's like that one. Oh, well, we got to do something about it. Well, it's like that. Oh, and I think we're going to get there. A lot of times in security, we're really good at looking at the downside of risk, but we're not always good at understanding where it fits into the total risk basket. Yeah. And so in our slice, it's not, this is, I don't know, you guys tell me, where, if I had to rank 100 things just in the cybersecurity world, where would this be? Top, middle, bottom?
That depends on the It depends on the application, the criticality of the business, or your product.
I think it's all fair point, right?
Yep.
So
every business is in fact a unique snowflake. Although there are some unique snowflakes that are very similar to others.
Yeah, and some are more uniquer than others.
Yeah, some are less uniquer than others.
But so now I've got that challenge and that issue. I have to figure out who to trust. I have to figure out how to explain it. I have to figure out how to evaluate the solutions. And then I've got a limited amount of budget, and I have to figure out where that goes. Mm. I mean, it's not going to be a challenge in the short run to find things that don't work well. That said, I'm liking the fact, Paul, that we're highlighting things that do work well. I like good examples.
You said that question that is weird right now for me. You said, who do I trust? And I'd argue, trust no one, trust everyone, and trust a select few. And I only say that just because I'm in the middle of reading George Orwell's 1984.
Yep.
Again, since high school, it's been 20 plus years. And it is very much that same sort of thing in that there's this 3 tiers of society. There's the inner party, the outer party, and then the proles. And they trust the proles implicitly. They trust everyone. But the outer party is like, trust no one, because if they do something bad, they're... Mm-hmm. And the inner party trusts a select few. They trust the inner party.
Mm-hmm. I also thought of Batman, like the 1988-89 Batman. Jack Nicholson as Joker. Who do you love? Who do you love? All right, sorry. It's where my brain.
This town needs an enema.
This next story is kind of interesting, and it kind of begs the question: Are we too hard on people who are convicted of computer crimes?
Did you say hard on?
He did. I was going to talk about going straight.
So, Kevin, what do you think about that?
Yeah, cut to Kevin. Take over.
We asked the hardest questions in security. It's
man. All right. So what would you do? Do we punish too harshly, or are we too lenient on those that commit computer crimes? Sean Tiernan, 29, of Santa Clara, California, was sentenced to 2 years probation, but no prison time for involvement in a spam botnet. His lawyer, who was successful and obviously a pretty good lawyer, their client deserved leniency for several reasons. One, when the FBI raided his home, he was completely cooperative and immediately confessed.
You don't want to get shot.
And a year later confessed to the CAN-SPAM Act violation.
Okay.
And it also said that damage caused by the botnet was real. It was relatively minor. It didn't steal financial data. It didn't extort them. The malware was easily removable. And it only collected IP addresses, which courts no longer consider to be private data. They noted the spam traffic generated was just advertising, not malware laden. And they are obviously leniency because it was just a kid when he got involved. By 2011, he was into his 20s, eligible to drink, vote, rent a car, execute contracts, and all the adult privileges, which seem to make him ineligible to claim adolescence as his defense, the article states. Now, the lawyer said he intends to go straight. He's enrolled in a cybersecurity graduate program and on his way to getting a job. Some people say it reflects a gross lack of awareness and understanding by the judge of incidents and the harm that they cause. They then go on to quote examples of Kevin Mitnick, former LOSEC member Mustafa Al-Bassam, as well as the infamous Sabu. Yeah. Kevin, I want to get your take on this.
This has always been a tough topic. I mean, if you kind of look back at the history of the internet in particular, it's definitely been a sliding scale when it comes to leniency. And the earlier cases of teenagers going to prison for accessing a system when the understanding of what that is maybe not have been as at a high standard as we have now. The fact that judges are giving leniency seems like it's kind of shifting in a different direction. Is that the right answer? I don't know. Some of these cases, have definite context to them. And the direct ones being quoted here saying this person didn't really cause that much harm in the grand scale. But then you kind of go backwards. Teenagers do really stupid stuff now that they just have access to the literal entire world. And as we've been discussing, over the last couple of hours, and every single show, software is really terrible, security is really hard, and now a teenager can buy an exploit kit online for a couple of bitcoins and wreck a lot of systems. Do they understand what they're doing? Most likely not. They're kids.
Now, Kevin,
should they go to prison? I don't know. I mean, this is
Kevin,
really challenging.
What they didn't highlight, which I think is interesting, and somewhat as part of, I think, really poor journalism, are and there's two cases that come to mind, and now I can't remember the people's names, and I should, and I apologize to all of our listeners because I'm just having a complete mental blank. But who was the very outspoken hacker that did the Apple thing and downloaded the Weave? Thank you. So there was Weave, who you could argue was persecuted very, very strongly in his case. And then there was who was the other very, very smart, brilliant young person that downloaded the materials from from
MIT?
Yeah, from MIT. What was his name, Kevin? You know. What was it?
Andrew Schwartz.
Yes, Andrew Schwartz, who then committed suicide. And those are two very, I think, extreme cases that weren't brought up in this article. It represents the other end of the spectrum. Kind of an aside note, I think that's some of the problems with journalism is you can bring up facts that support one argument or the other and not present both sides for people, which is why I like doing these shows, because we have a discussion about it and try and present all sides of it. So
try. I will say
we try. We do our best, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Kevin.
I was going to say we've discussed this a few times before about the technical challenges of the legal system, and this could be an example of that. A lot of these stories are becoming very widespread in the last 10 years. People are actually hearing about attacks that are impacting your home, particularly ransomware, malware, and going right back to the DDE example before. Is it a good thing that these things are happening? No. Is it a good thing that judges in the legal system are starting to give some of the younger participants in these avenues to put, obviously, that the fact that they're very bright to better uses? That is a good thing. But it is kind of a catch-22 because there's always going to be bad apples, and I'm not sure just saying you're a kid. Good luck next time is the right approach to this. At the same time,
to be fair, when I looked at this, when I read some of the stuff around it, I didn't see it as, oh, well, you're a kid, so you're off. What they said, and I know it's going to piss a lot of people off, was there wasn't a lot of harm here.
Yeah,
you didn't steal
damage.
Data. You didn't you didn't do damage. And so what's interesting is that there are the technical challenges of the legal system, but there's also the way our legal system was the common law system was designed to evolve. So the problem that we tend to highlight is you take any number of the laws that we have in order to prosecute crimes like this, and there's a lot of prosecutorial discretion. And so if you get somebody who wants to make a name for themselves, you're going to go to one end of the spectrum. If you have somebody else who isn't particularly sure or wants to look at it differently, you go to the other end of the spectrum. What's starting to happen now, too, and you bring up a really interesting point, Kevin, in that the awareness now of something like ransomware or the awareness of botnets is probably higher in the general population than it's ever been. But even in the wake of Equifax, every time I see one of these headlines that says, was it now 143 million people have had their identity compromised? No, you haven't. No, stop. And more importantly, and it hasn't been compromised 10 times already? I mean, show me that you got harm from this particular breach as opposed to one of the 200 or 300 others that you know about before it or otherwise. And so what we've seen in some of these class action suits is, and again, this is still not clear, where's the harm? And do you have the burden to demonstrate harm? And do you have to pinpoint it on somebody specific, or is there a general take on it? And some of the courts have gone one way, and some are going the other way. Right. So when this one comes down and they say, look, there's not a lot of harm, and in fact, it looks like he was essentially just running ads and making money so he could go to school. The judge kind of looked at that and went, okay, right way to do it? No. But
was your intent good? Yeah.
Well, and we've talked about
intention matters.
It does. We've talked about intent before, and none of us are lawyers, but intent definitely plays into it For sure.
When you look at police for an offline, if there are a bunch of communities where there's no soliciting, especially where I worked as an EMT in New Jersey, and so I used to talk to the police, and I'd say, well, how do you decide then whether to stop somebody and say, sir, ma'am, there's no soliciting in this neighborhood, and I don't know why you're here, versus not? And they said, well, we look for intent. So, well, how the hell do you measure intent? They said, well, we have to guess. And that's always sorted out with a quick trip to the station, and we have a chat. And if we're wrong, good to go. And if we're right, well, then we have a different direction with it. And so what we find then is that there's the harm. So the
prostitutes looking to put themselves through school are okay, but the ones just trying to score crack.
It's a great point.
Wrong solicitation. Yeah. Wrong solicitation. Got it. Okay.
Depends on whether they're going to the mayor's house, right?
Or what?
But then let me throw a curveball in this. You bring up a really interesting point. What about the cases of kids in high school or college who are changing their grades? And how can that be looked at from an intent standpoint? If they're not harming the society or the greater world, but there are cases where people are, the book is thrown at them. They're kicked out of school. Their life is ruined. They potentially can go to prison.
Well, and let me just build on that, because I actually I've advised on some of these cases, so I think that they've been interesting. But with kids in school, it's fascinating. One of my kids' friends got suspended from school for 2 or 3 days, and there were assault charges filed. Another kid was mocking him. He slapped him. And the way the school handles that now is, okay, you're suspended, cops are called. And I said, wow, I mean, in our day, that got settled. There were apologies, and you went on with it. You didn't get a police record. And so it's the same thing, Kevin. It's there's a, and it's, I'm not liking it. Kids are going to be kids. And at some point, it's not acceptable. But then at the other point, so we're going to throw you out, ruin your life, and you can never do anything again?
I mean, if someone cheats on a test, there could be the metaphorical slap on the wrist, right? But if someone accesses the grades database and changes their grade, ostensibly the same end result, potentially, of cheating on the test, they could theoretically get kicked out or go to jail.
Well, so now do you see then?
It's a great point.
Well, I want to extend it one bit, because we have seen cases where executives get fired because they misrepresented their education or work history, and it goes uncovered. It gets uncovered. It's covered up for a long time, and then one day somebody does a check and says, you didn't actually graduate from this school like you said you did, and you didn't actually do these things. But they don't typically go to jail. They just get fired. And possibly disgraced. And so, I think you've got a good point, Kevin, in that we need to allow the opportunity for mistakes to be made and regret to be expressed and remorse to be expressed and corrective action. And I'll tell you, when you look at just human nature, that's an area that there's dozens of books on it, and they're fairly similar, and it always comes down to it kind of depends on the context. And that's the way that the courts tend to look at things, and so this will settle itself out. It's just going to take time, because these are the questions that we have to ask. And so as you said, Kevin, is there clarity on it? No. The thing that I always go back to, and I might get this wrong, I'm trying to remember back freshman psychology. I think it was a sociologist named Gibbs. Now I could be wrong on that. It could be Gibson. It was something along that, and he talked about that.
You're thinking like Gibbs from like NCIS?
Well, that's where I wonder now if I may have slightly modified.
Been a crossing of the stream.
It's one of the 11s. It's one of his rules, right?
Gibson,
rule number
Gibson
11.
from Hackers.
Or Gibson playing a guitar, thinking about. Anyway, the idea was, from a sociological perspective, if you look at punishment as a deterrent, it only works if there's a certainty of getting caught, there's a certainty of the outcome of the punishment, and it's meted out within a pretty rapid time space. And basically, our justice system doesn't really rise to any of those particular levels. So I think the counter question to start to explore, which is almost as uncomfortable, is, does any jail time, does any of this stuff actually act as a deterrent for somebody?
Depends on the person.
Because it's almost like, are we thinking about this the right way?
I don't know. But, it would be a deterrent for me, because I'm too good looking for prison.
You might have a good time, though, Larry.
I look bad in orange jumpsuits.
Yeah. Orange is not my color, and I'm too good looking for prison.
That was a Mike Poor comment, by the way.
Yeah.
When speaking of ethics in hacking, to put that in context, which we've talked about in having a conference that was largely geared towards those in the Cyber Patriot program. And someone did bring up during the conference, hey, we're teaching these kids about hacking. What if they use it for bad instead of good? And how do we educate not just the students about ethics, but also the educators about what the correct, to Kevin's point, what the correct form of punishment is for this particular behavior, to understand not just the technical details, but Kevin, I think, made a really great point. If you're cheating on a test and you're cheating by hacking into your grades, it's really the same behavior. But I agree. I feel like they're punished more severely because there was hacking involved. And how is that any different? So I think the lesson here, moving forward, as we want to do more in this community, especially, is to educate the students, of course, to ethics, but also educate the educators to understand this problem, and us as the security community guide both the students and the educators, and allow them to learn in a safe environment. Be like, dude, you don't have to prove your hacking skills by hacking your grades, right? Don't act unethical by cheating, which is a lesson outside of security. But if you need a safe place to do that, there's lots of places to do that. In fact, there's probably thousands of people listening to this show now that would raise their hand and say, yeah, I would stand up a lab for kids to play around in and learn security.
Well, yeah, and there's an interesting point too, and it's that intersection of ethics and legality. You can do things that are not ethical that are legal, and you can do things that are ethical and actually in some cases illegal.
Yep.
And so what happens then too is that ethics it's not finite. It's almost like a bell curve distribution, and for some people, the standard deviation is a little wider than others. And so what you're saying then is that as an industry, or I would even say as a community, we need to keep having these conversations so that we can more clearly define the boundaries and where you're into those gray areas and where you go from there. And then that over time starts to influence what becomes reasonable security and starts to influence then some of those legal aspects to it. But Paul, I really like the idea of being able to say, I think if we could get more involved in our communities and say, I'll set up a lab, I'll help with the CTF, I'll help host these competitions, I think we solve a lot of problems, and I would open that not just to the students. I'd open it to anybody. And, we see a lot of hacker spaces and maker spaces that are doing that very thing, and they're letting families come together and check some of this stuff out, and there's no quicker way to demystify it. And if you look at any of the stuff that's happened, I mean, I like the Cyber Patriot program a lot. If you look at the way that the National Guard does stuff.
Well, yeah, they were there at our conference.
Okay, and so if you look at like
they got the live fire range, right?
Well, if you look at their Cyber Shield exercises, they bring the Guard units in, which is a great chance for the Guard units to try it, but they bring in their commercial partners. And so what's cool then is that they're really testing out, okay, well, how do we work with the Fusion Cell? How do we go talk to the lawyers? How do we talk to the commercial lawyers? And what's great is the companies that get involved, they take it really seriously. Well, then where you go from this is the executives come in, they have typically what they call DV Day, Distinguished Visitors Day, and the executives come in and they ask questions and they get to see it. And that's why we like this live fire range. They get to see this is what the red team's doing, this is what the blue team's doing. They get to tour, they get to ask questions. And suddenly they go, whoa, have we done this in our organization? So I think that's the answer for a lot of this stuff. I think the answer is let's ask these questions, let's make this stuff available for people, let's pull these things together, and then in that, we can have a better conversation about ethics and a better conversation about legality because now they've seen it, they've experienced it, they've seen what it's like, and I think that's a lot better.
Stealing is wrong, is what
we're sharing.
What I'm saying. That's sharing. That's sharing, not stealing. Right. Well, sharing without permission is stealing, I guess.
We're so close. You have my permission.
There you go. It's implied.
Nice.
Well, Michael, Larry, and Kevin, I don't know what happened to Jeff. I hope everything's okay. He dropped off. I'm not sure.
Beginning of the segment.
Not sure what happened. But hopefully Jeff's okay. Not Kevin, especially, dude. Nice to have you back. Appreciate you being back on the show, and especially appreciate your insights, and especially some of these stories we talked about. So,
I always.
Thanks for having me back. And if I drop off again, look for the ninjas. They've kidnapped me.
That's right. That's right. Don't get kidnapped by ninjas again. We want you back. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Paul Security Weekly. Larry, as always, take us out.
Over and